What's up, guys? Steven here today, and today what I wanted to talk to you about is fucking the pause pose for frame. So kind of funny because I've been wanting to put out this video for a long time, and because I know the sheer monster that it is as far as comprising a lot of more, if you want to put it, body oriented, body mechanics, human body systems, concepts, and ideas that may have been, in a way, glossed over in this series, but at least touched upon enough to where it built the foundation to where you would know what it is that I was trying to express. I felt it best to actually let time, to take my time, or let the arising or the unfolding of time to essentially flesh out the idea more. And through that, kind of allow me to essentially build a greater repertoire for reference experiences or multi-dimensional ideas or concepts that I can use to better relate this abstract idea to you, right? So now let's kind of touch upon some of the main points that build this idea. So you may or may not have heard of different, to put it simply, channels in the human body that essentially, for lack of a better word, have a particular essence, or if you want, a sort of sensible personality to them, in a sense that maybe one channel is more of a boisterous, like, I don't want to say naive young boy, but optimistic young person, young child, young boy who's just wanting to put a smile on his face and explore the world for what it is, right? While the other one is more of a collective, laid back, analytical type of personality, kind of like a cat just sitting in the corner mewling over the scenery and their ever so mystic type of allure that they have to them, right? So these different channels and their respective personalities tend to play critical positions or roles in the very way that we interact with the world, right? For example, some cultures refer to them as Nadiis, others refer to them as Meridians, right? But essentially, they're all technically the same thing. You can think of, if you take the human body, right, and you essentially just draw lines across it from top to bottom, right? And then if you want to get even more creative, you find points, nooks and crannies across the body where there is a sort of connecting point from one joint to the other, essentially causing a sort of ripple in what would have been a straight line. This is essentially what forms a loop, right? And thus redirection of the straight vertical to something that may look more horizontal or oval altogether, right? Now, that is the base concept of this. Now, to go back to the personalities. So, for example, some cultures refer to, they go a step further and actually kind of try to like distill down to the two main driving energies that essentially empower or channel through these or move across these channels, right? Some refer to them as, one channel has the Ida and another has the Pingdala, right? And essentially drawing their nexus at essentially, if you want, the tip of the jaw, right? Right where there's that separation from the ear on downwards. And as you make your way down just with your finger, you just notice that there's a sort of crisscross or meeting point, right? And that is essentially how they're typically illustrated, right? They have a particular road and way to where they are depicted going from the top to the bottom, as I mentioned. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because if you really analyze this and like actively bring it into maybe your meditation sessions, you'll come to realize that not only do they not form a perfect straight line as we are often maybe taught or instilled to believe, but more importantly, it's almost as if because of the natural ebb and flow that is the human body, they actually they interweave, kind of like the sisters of fate drawing webs, right? And such, because of that, like dynamic ability, they essentially conjoin, disjoin, but more importantly, kind of like mix, but not in a way that you would mix maybe recipes together for a meal, but it's almost as if the sheer aspect of them just moving, being close by each other, creates a sort of byway by which energy transfer, and upon that energetic influence, if you will, is enabled, right? The way I would think about it is like um, uh, uh, someone who is hula hooping, right? And they're doing it so fast that at some point it's almost as if the sheer momentum of it just causes the hula hoop to just keep going. And by them just maintaining that strong center of gravity, they're able to interact with the totality of the 360 sphere that is the hula hoop itself. In this, there are literally tricks that can be done because of the sheer, it's almost like because it's going so fast and taking its own movement, its own flow, you can do things that may appear to where it's as if the hula hoop is essentially levitating on its own, right? Just by the sheer force of the interweaving physics or elements that are tied to the physics of the scenario and all of that together. In the same way, this is essentially how these channels or meridians or Nadiis interact with one another. Something that I wanted to add is both of these respective Nadiis, if you want, or energy pathways have a distinctive personality. Or I want to use root characteristic texture because that's more ingrained with what my mind seems to want to express what I'm trying to say when trying to make relations to what I'm talking about. And oftentimes you see people attributing color, one's red, one's blue, etc., or even just base archetypal forces. One's dominant, one's submissive. But I think the most pristine way of putting it is one is active and then one's passive, right? One's active in the sense that it's almost like it's a seeker, just constantly, just consciously probing or consciously willing things into motion. while the other one is more in tandem with what the previous moment was doing. It's more going with the flow. But even saying going with the flow is not the best representation or the best words. But it's, I guess, what's the ones that come most to mind. Now, the point that I wanted to make is, if there was a point when we didn't have what was called the 7 chakras, there were actually far fewer, right? The reason why I'm saying this now is it's just a revelation that finally dawned on me why. Essentially, you have mind, body, and then spirit, right? But then to represent the spectrum, which is male and female, the spirit part is different depending on the sex of the person at heart, right? If it's a man, you have a penis. If it's a girl, you have somewhat of an open shell, like an ovaries or hole, whatever you want to call it, right? With erogenous zones and the closer to the center, right, etc., etc. But tying this energy and energy centers in the body, if you will, the sex actually defines the model pertaining to that particular person. If you have a boy, you tend to go back to the lesser numbered chakra model. If you have a girl, you tend to go to what's most commonly seen today, the more numbers. And the reason for this is that girls came to teach us something, right? You can't live within, can't live with them, you can't live without them. And this ties back to another point that I wanted to mention with these forces. Within each of them is somewhat of, you want to think of it as like a nexus. That's almost as if, it's almost like a black hole or a stargate, if you will, where on the other side, you wind up into the region or the domain of the other force, but you're still in the pathway of this energy point. And this is a crucial and a game-changing factor because it allows you to understand just what the fuck the spinal column actually is, right? Mind, body, spirit, and then you have toroids, or you have something of a toroid that's spinning constantly, causing relations between the two to intermerge, submerge, but never lose their distinct personalities or root characteristic texture, if you want to put it in that way. Meaning that no matter where they are, they'll always be able to find themselves. And this is where I think originality, spirituality, or even what we usually coin as soul comes from, right? Where moments of just like sheer genius where you don't know how you came up with that. But it was clearly just like a pure merging of opposing, or what seems to be opposing things, opposing elements. My main point though is to just keep in mind that toroid, right? It's kind of like, think of a hole and a hole, and within it, there's just kind of like a spinning thing, is what people deem. They have different names for it. It runs all the way down the body. It's the middle line, the kundalini, the spinal column, and essentially what is in green in my picture. I think I draw it in green. Anyways, but it's where really the magic is. I hope this makes sense. Another fun way of thinking of these nexuses is essentially imagine having a generator that just automatically kickstarts just to make shit interesting when shit seems to die down. Now, my main reason behind talking or introducing all of these concepts is because when you take a moment and meditate upon it, you'll realize that one of your foot is more active or in tandem with this active energy, and the other foot is more passive or in tandem with this passive energy. What does that mean concretely? I just realized that another great way of putting passive would be going in line with the group think, going in line with the group flow. And the active is going in line with more of an individual think or an individual flow, forging your own way if you want. Now, what this means is depending on the way that your body physiotype, etc., the packaging that is your physical elements, your physical model, if you want your physical exoskeleton, you will have a way of spinning in one direction clockwise or in another counterclockwise that's going to be more aligned with a group flow spin. And you'll have a way of spinning, whether clockwise or counterclockwise, that will be more in line with an individualistic flow. So what I'm trying to say is I didn't specifically say that when you spin clockwise, you're actually going with the group flow, and when you spin counterclockwise, you're going with your own flow, because those are things that are more contextual and are more driven or more tied to a person's overall makeup, right? Go back to swag movement to kind of just get more of a feel for this. But the sense is that you want to figure those things out for yourself, because it's going to make you more of a deadlier player, because you're going to have a higher level of awareness when it comes to micro movements or moments in time where the achievement of maybe scoring a goal or making a key play lies literally in which direction you spin into. And to make the wise moves in those moments, you gotta know yourself. And this is one way in which you can go about exploring that and coming to that realization on a deep level, sinking your teeth into the meat sort of way. Now, the reason why I kind of like hashed it out in that way is because when you think about that and you kind of tie in together all the other concepts that I mentioned in this series, then you'll start to see that there is a very distinct pattern that is tied into the individualistic makeup, or if you want, the packaging that is you of the person at hand. And because of the paramount importance of the uniqueness of that packaging, it causes, if you want, game changing or random or creative elements to emerge, multiplied by this interweaving of energies, right? So that is literally the best and only way I can put this. Just kind of laying the foundation for something that's really, really abstract and is most likely better understood as a picture, right? So this is me trying to essentially scaffold out the cover art or the thumbnail, if you will. Now, the point that I was trying to make in drawing that is that if you realize what you would think would be channels just minding their own business on maybe opposite yet symmetric sides of the spinal column, because of the sheer tandem aspect of the human body, they end up essentially being kissing cousins at times when is most oft unexpected, right? And this is essentially what I come to the idea of the pause. Because oftentimes we think of maybe a clashing of two forces has something that would cause a resulting, not just a sound, a bang, but we typically just end up focusing on the end redirectional object, right? Like we end up focusing on the thing that is moved more than the other object, right? If you want, the stronger or dominating force. But what's most interesting is that if you think about nature, if you think about something as light has a breeze, you'll often come to the realization that there are actually moments like this, if you want to call them harmonious things, if you will, where because of the aligning of self and awareness and even the environment and all these random elements at play that you would typically never really give mind to, because of the sheer precise synchronicity of all these things, they end up essentially causing what I would essentially refer to as a pause. It's as if for a moment, right? Because I don't want to get specific on the particular quantum of time here, but for a moment in time, it's as if literally everything just stops. But everything not only it's kind of like the experience of feeling as if it's not just as deep as, oh, we're experiencing the same moment together, but sometimes there's certain experiences in your life that you kind of go through where you literally, word for word, on every sense of the word, feel like you experienced an event on the same wavelength as someone sharing time and space with you. And there is a certain, not just kinship, but like uniqueness to the fact that that is true, right? So now bringing this back to soccer, for example, oftentimes I see this when it's as if there is an emerging, impactful play that is about to arise. And by you being a conscious operator and actually seeing it unfold, as opposed to just playing in a reaction to whatever it is going on, by you literally just stopping and standing still where you are, assessing and analyzing everything that is going on in the situation, literally almost as if in that moment you decide to meditate. It is almost as if you become that pause, right? Um, Now, because of that, it's almost as if whatever it is that arises from that moment on, coming from you, becomes a game changer, because there's a certain aspect of I don't want to use the word willful tandem, but like something that is in line with nature itself, but it's so aligned and precise, yet it's conscious by virtue of being a living being. And so because of that, it just works, right? It could be as simple as just making a small step, but like a very precise step, because you're reading whatever it is going on and you're realizing that's what is actually paramount to either scoring or preventing a goal from arising. People use the word magic or they get really hyphy here, but I don't know. I kind of don't really make things so mystified that you're just kind of like, what? But I would just leave it to kind of how I've been putting it and building it from the standpoint of it is something that you come to the awareness of once you've realized that meditation is possible as an active practice, and then instilling it or inviting that spirit forth in your gameplay itself, right? So from then on, you'll come to realize that in this pause, it's as if now you almost see the different gears that people are moving at. Someone could be moving at a faster speed but at a lower rate. Another person could be moving at a lower rate but a faster speed. And by you being aware of those subtle nuances, it's almost as if you're able to just shift and really, really play at a more keen level than ever before, right? Um, I kind of like to call these essentially, it's almost as if you've entered the hyperforce time chamber in a sense, right? Like, um, in this, once this moment arises, once you step into it, in a sense, it's as if time doesn't operate as it typically does, right? And um, this is where that concept of time-based domains that I mentioned in the past before really become crystallized, because you just start moving at a level beyond just the normal slipstream of the gameplay, right? And that's where really, really fun and neat things start taking effect, right? You, whether you want to call it moving ahead of time or anticipating or setting things up before the occasion for them or the opportunity for them to occur can occur, it's really up to you. But there's really no other way I can put this, right? The most important, I guess, uh, picture of this is, imagine, so I use the word slipstream, right? And just imagine Tron, right? How like there's that track, and it's almost like drawn ahead of time. There's like one track that's like more highlighted than the other because it's essentially, if you want, the baseline or the slipstream of the gameplay at this current time. But there are multiple others that you can always slide into in one way or the other. It's just up to your, if you want, artistic expression of your body mechanics and the way you go about arising to them, whether that means a different movement, a slide backwards, or something altogether completely creative. And that's really where the past videos kind of build on that, just how to hone that eye for self-expression on a level that's more in tune and resonant with who you are and how you were made than anything else. Because once you have that understanding, then intelligence just becomes a matter of playing to what you have in front of you, as opposed to just mindlessly just throwing yourself against the wall, whether or not it's actually the right thing to do. There was another funny part of this that I wanted to touch on, and it's, I had it pose for frame, kind of referring to that old Ricky Bobby song that came about like a few years ago. And that's kind of why, the reason why I mention it is because I think oftentimes, whether it's unconscious or conscious, we kind of recognize those pause or keyframe type of moments occurring. But I think what we often forget to do is realize that although it's arising, or it is something that is coming closer and closer to you on the time domain, it's also something that on some level you have to essentially open and allow yourself to essentially experience. It's kind of, another way of putting this is, we often move too fast because we are not patient enough. So even though you see it coming and you already have, I guess, the move or this or decision ready to go in anticipation of capitalizing on this moment, I think the best thing to realize is there is the occurrence of the moment, and then like there's this like micro moment right after where you're essentially basking in it. And what I'm trying to say is that in that moment, you're able to almost get a second read on whether or not the decision that you made really was the right decision. Because everything is so dynamic, especially the game that is soccer today, right? Like, there are just so many more things that are at play than what was there when maybe it was at its infancy. So what was true or was occurring in like one frame ago may not be the case the next. So it's almost like a smelling of the rose that is a benefit for you to just kind of bask in it and ensure that, okay, not only am I feeling this right, but this is literally the right thing to do. I don't know if I'm being too verbose or I kind of lost you, or it seems as if I'm repeating myself or not really saying anything. But that's literally how I would put that. I guess the more relatable or poppable way of putting it is in terms of when it comes to the team dynamic, right? I feel like too often, because we're so eager to touch this moment and capitalize for ourselves, we forget that we're always essentially playing a line game, right? Like there's someone down the line from you, there's someone to the side and behind you. And so, what you might think to be the right time may not be based on just the positioning of where everyone is at. And so, what you might think to be the right move or the right way to step into it may actually be something that's actually stepping on a friendly line or essentially cutting someone out somewhere else. So, I guess the call for vigilance or um, being precautious is kind of what arose me to, or what compelled me to kind of like put what I mentioned in the past moment in that way. Because I feel like once you put that aspect of the game into your frame of mind, then the creativity really takes another level. Because then it's almost like it's not just you moving, but you can move through your players or your teammates in one way or the other. I hope that made sense. um, that was really, really hard to put out because I know it's probably going to be one of the videos in a series where just the sheer aspect of what I'm trying to say seems so abstract that it might really not be something that most people will find to be beneficial. But I do hope you do get something out of this. Anyways, as always, swag the fuck out.